Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts as they share with you the insider's guide to property investing.
All right, folks, you're on the Property Couch, your insider's guide to property investing. I'm Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle channel. He's Ben Kingsley, the co-host of this show and also the Property Investment Advisor of the Year, as well as the chair of the Property Investment Professionals of Australia. Hello, mate. In fact, you've got a glow.
I've been away.
You've been away this week?
I've been on holidays.
Mate, you've been up in Cairns. How was it?
Yeah, no, good. Cairns, Port Douglas, and a little place called Tinaroo, up on Lake Tinaroo, which is in the Atherton Tablelands. So hired a house up there, took the family on the lake, and then a bit of time back in Cairns and Port Douglas. So it was lovely. Very
nice. Now, any tips to our listeners who've got young children on how to have a holiday up north without sort of having to how to read a book with young kids?
You don't have any free time when you've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. Let's be honest. It's either getting them fed or keeping them in the water so that you exhaust them. So come 7:30, you can actually have your life back.
As I always say with my wife, it's an investment in 7 o'clock. The more you can wear them out by 7 o'clock, the more you can have of your own time, which is always good. Now, we've hit a milestone, mate.
Have we?
Do you remember when we first started this podcast and we thought, let's just give this a go?
Yep.
Here we are, episode number 27, which meant last week was exactly half a year ago we started this podcast. So they said we'd never last.
Did they?
Well, the person who gave us a 2 out of 5.
What was that old beer ad? The Forex ad? You said you'd never make it.
But you finally came through.
Yeah,
that applies to us. And 34,000 downloads in half a year.
That's good. Let's get it to 50.
Let's get it to 50, mate. I like that. Now, it'd be remiss of me. I've been waiting for you to come back from Cairns, just to let you know, before you went to Cairns, you were leading the footy tips.
Oh,
when you come home from Cairns, you're not leading the footy tips.
Obviously,
what happened?
My brain was on holidays.
The brain was on holidays.
Or maybe I overthought it. Maybe I had more time to actually think about the tips. So who's let me down? Freo let me down twice. North let me down last week. And I didn't back my gut and go with the Pies against the Cats, which I should have done.
That's a good point. Now, rumour has it Freo's letting the competition down this week, resting up to 11 players. But that's another story for another day. At the end of the day,
it's about getting the silverware at the end of the year, not finishing on top of the ladder. If you get premierships to finish on top of the ladder, the Collingwood would have a cabinet full.
Yeah.
You know, it's just September action that doesn't get us silverware at the end of the day.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Collingwood Hour. But as we move on, we're going to talk about some auction tips today for the states that actually have auctions, which we acknowledge not all states have them in large quantities.
But there has been a trend, Bryce.
Yeah.
Brisbane has certainly picked up the number of auctions that they're doing at the moment. Adelaide's doing a few more, Perth's doing a few more. So I think, as I've said when we're buying up in Brisbane, to agents, I said, you're crazy not to do auctions up here, because if you want to get the best price for your vendor, usually an auction environment is a great way to get an outperform result. Whereas if you've got a sale by set date or a traditional private treaty sale, you usually don't get those surprise results. And auctions give you that.
Whose team are you on, mate? It makes it harder for me when there's auctions.
Well, I know from a buyer's agent.
I'm the buyer's agent here. I'm on private sales.
Yeah, but we've got to think of all the clients that we've bought property for in terms of getting them the best results on their property and increasing their value. Well, and auction's the best way to do it.
So therefore, what we say is any of our clients who are thinking of reselling, they can auction the rest of the market.
We quite like it, the easier. But again, we've talked about this before. If the market's super hot, and we're trying to buy at auction, there's got to be a special need for that. We would be crazy going into a marketplace, and that's why we haven't been buying in Sydney now for over 12, 14 months, because it's like when it gets to that sort of stage, we're in other markets. We're in markets that are about to turn as opposed to markets that are cooking with gas. So
I think it's a good point that you raised before, that I think the auction process really suits the seller. It really suits the agent. The agent is so desensitised to the whole process of it that they would rather have an auction campaign because they can get it done and dusted within, it's usually a 6-week time frame, 2 weeks in the lead up, have a 4-week campaign, it's done. And for a lot of the really successful real estate agents in this country, for them to be able to secure the incomes that they want, they actually need auction campaigns because private sale campaigns can drag out. And one of the good things for them with an auction campaign is it provides a deadline, and it means that they also, as one of their techniques, when if an auction passes in, what they do is they send the bill to the vendor straight away on the Monday for the auction campaign. It gets them sort of motivated to get the deal done. It's one of their techniques to shorten that time frame.
Listen to that again, guys, because what Bryce just talked about is exactly a point from a conditioning agent. So what basically Bryce is saying there is that agents don't get paid if they don't sell the property. So having a time period that allows the agent to condition the seller to take the best offer and so forth helps them in their conversion. So at the end of the day, selling agents are working for the vendor, but in technical sense, they're still working for themselves.
Yeah, agreed. So we live in Melbourne. We buy lots of property all throughout the country. So we're in one of the big metropolises. So if we were afraid of buying at auction, we wouldn't buy any good real estate, to be honest. And that's one of the points that I'd like to make. So I remember doing an episode of the show. It was a couple of seasons ago. I had a couple that were moving. They were Tasmanians, and they were moving. They actually lived in Melbourne, but they wanted to move to Hampton. And they said, we don't want to buy any properties that go to auction because we don't like the process. And it kind of reminds me of one of the episodes that Veronica did where they had a French couple.
Yep.
And it's not part of their culture in France to have
or
auctions.
The UK or any other part.
And so they said, look, we just refuse to be buying at auction. And today's really about arming our listeners if they're looking to buy an investment property or one for themselves, for their own home for that matter. If they're looking to buy at auction, we're going to run through some of our thoughts and our ideas on how you can best prepare yourself to buy at auction, because it is a necessary evil. It actually favours the seller. It favours the agent, although sellers have this love-hate relationship with it because they're usually happy at the end when they get an outperform result.
Yep.
But the anxiety that they burn in the lead up to an auction is enormous.
Correct.
And buyers feel the same way as well. So, mate, we thought we'd just give the listeners a few tips. So, any you want to kick off with?
Well, yeah, I concur with what Bryce is saying there, because what you're saying, mate, is Melbourne is the auction capital of the world for property. So we are blessed by having been to thousands and thousands of auctions in our own state. So we've bidded for clients at hundreds of auctions, and we've seen lots of them. So coming back to the basic point, a real estate agent will recommend an auction as a sales process when they believe they've got strong support and strong demand. So traditionally in inner city areas, there's always underlying demand. But when we're talking about, say, 15, 20, 30 kilometres out, or even in new estate areas, the only time a good selling agent will recommend an auction process is when they think they've got that underlying interest in the property and they think that they'll be able to get a good result. Otherwise, they'll go private treaty. So the first things first. When you're going to auction, usually it's because they're confident that that's going to be the best sales result for that client. So the first thing I would always say to anyone looking at auctions is get along to as many auctions as you can during your research phase. So, you could, a good Saturday, you should be able to see 8 to 10 auctions. That's working from pretty much 10:30 in the morning probably through to 2:30. Okay, some that draw on a bit, you might get to 5 because they might have a really long time of it. But usually you should be able to get to 8 if you especially start with a couple of units, see what happens there, and then study your audience.
Yeah, because you want to understand the lingo that the agents are using. You want to do, because there's really 3 parts to an auction. The agent is in control of the auction from the opening bid right up to where the buyer's inquiry has been from the campaign. From the buyer's inquiry to the reserve, the owner is in control. And then from the reserve to blue sky, the buyer is in control. So the agent is actually trying to get you up to buyer's inquiry, but his job is to try and get you to reserve. So it's important. One of the number one things is you've got to look, when you're attending these auctions, you've got to understand the language, the body language, the speed of tone that the auctioneer has got when they're at that point, when they're not yet reached reserve, because they're desperately trying to get the bidding to that point there. So I tend not to get involved too early because for a couple of reasons. One, I want to see who my competition is, who I'm up against. But 2, I don't want to make his job easy. I want them to go inside, have a chat to the owners and say, hey, look, we had some people that were interested through the campaign. They're not showing their hand. And they're trying to get the owner to be realistic at where their reserve is. So ultimately, we can put it on the market earlier.
And just again, from the seller's side of things, what would usually happen is the auctioneer may not be necessarily the person who's done the listing campaign. So they're a specialist auctioneer where they've come along to present the property and to build the hype, build the momentum, build the emotion and get the best result. Now, when you're a vendor, usually the morning of your auction, you're going to be informed by your listing agent as to your A, Bs and Cs are. Now, what I mean by A, B and C buyers, they should have a rough idea as to who their really keen buyers are. That's their A buyer. Their B buyer who's shown some interest, got a contract. And then the C buyer is that walk-up, that unknown that they don't know much about, who have kept their cards close to the chest. So it's really interesting to know from the selling side what's happening and how they're talking to their vendor, because that auctioneer is then given that instructions. They point them out in the audience. These are the people who have got a lot of interest, and the auctioneer's got to try and work those buyers to get the best result out of them.
Yeah, that's right. And you talked about the walk-up. That's often what I do as a buyer's agent. I recently bought a property on behalf of my cousin who was buying in Glen Iris here in Melbourne. I'd never been through the campaign at all. I'd seen it online. He'd obviously seen it. And I said to him, "Where are you at?" And it was a 1.5 plus campaign, and it sold for 1.816. So that's the first tip right there, that the price guides. I don't think that's any secret to anyone who's seriously involved in the industry, but unfortunately a lot of amateurs get caught up in underquoting. But all I said to him is, we've got to know what the most recent relevant sale happened within the last few weeks for us to know where our limit needs to be.
Yep.
Because the underbidder who missed out on the other one is likely to come to this one if it's comparable. So that's the first point.
And how many bidders were underbidders? Like, did it get right to the last bit at 3 bidders, at 4 bidders, or was it just between 2?
Right.
So you know how much competition you might have.
So the thing is that I turned up, I bidded, and the auctioneer, do you know how they go going once, going twice, going 3 times? And if they're not at reserve, I don't even fall for that, but a lot of people do.
Oh.
And what happened is the agent started looking at my cousin, or in fact his wife, and she just panicked, and because it had gone third and final time, I knew it wasn't going to go down, and she panicked, and she looked over at me and stared at me and almost gave it away that I was bidding for, and I just said, "Look, just hold cool your jets here, because we are not yet on the market." So you said attend many auctions. That is why. Attenders, and particularly the auctioneer who is going to be doing the auction for the property that you're interested in.
Great tip.
Because you want to know what he does.
Yeah.
You want to know, because I want to turn up at auctions where the auctioneer isn't a good auctioneer.
Yep.
If I turn up at an auction where the auctioneer is a good auctioneer, he's so clever, or she is so clever at drawing out the last $250. Come on, give us another 250. It's going to be cheaper than you starting again next week. And I don't necessarily want to be up against those guys. But you need to know what your competition is. You need to know the language that they're talking about, and you need to be understanding the process. Because when you're putting your hand up for yourself, I've got to tell you, the adrenaline kicks in for me every time. I don't get nervous, but the adrenaline kicks in for me every time, and I'm spending someone else's money. So when it's your own money, it's so easy to fall apart.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the biggest challenge for most novices when it comes to auction tips and auction bidding, I should say, is that it's street theatre. And a lot of people don't like public speaking. And a lot of people don't like that attention on them, especially if they don't know their content. So, if you're a great public speaker, it's usually because you know your content, you're well rehearsed. Well, not everyone gets up during the day and does an auction, do they?
No.
So this is foreign territory for them, sweaty palms, accelerated heart rate. Whereas a professional who's working on the buyer side, it's routine, it's understanding, it's intimidation. So I've always referred to it as street theatre. So if you're confident in the street and you're a confident bidder, that's going to put some intimidation into the market. It may not necessarily win you every auction, but it's going to, in some cases, put the first timers on, question. They've got just deeper pockets. I'll give you an example. I was bidding at another place in Hampton, and when we got down to the final sort of $60,000, $80,000, my client was in the car around the corner. I got the call. I made it very theatrical. How much? Really? Okay, great. I'll get this. And then hung up. And then ultimately, I was only up with one other couple at that stage. So within 2 bids, I bought the property. And they came up and congratulated me and said, "Oh, you just had more money than we did. You had deeper pockets." When in reality, I was right at death's door. That was it for me. I had nothing left in the tank. So from that point of view, it's a good example of intimidation. Again, it doesn't work all the time, but you've got to look confident, don't you?
Agreed. So I always think that most people would prefer to be in the casket than deliver the eulogy. And so I use that as my strength, because to be honest, I would feel more comfortable in front of a group of 200 people than I am at a one-on-one conversation at a party. I'm an introvert, and that's how I roll. But I use that to my advantage because ultimately, you've made the point that people are very afraid of public speaking. So I think you said street theatre. I used to think it was 2-part strategy, 1-part bluff. I don't anymore. I actually think it's 2-part bluff, 1-part strategy, because I've seen so many bidders try so many tactics. The disruptor. Excuse me, Mr. Auctioneer, did you realise there was asbestos in the back shed in front of everyone? I've never seen that actually work. And all it does is put the auctioneer offside. I never get adversarial with the auctioneer because I want him to knock the hammer down to me. I don't want him thinking, I don't want this bloke to buy. But I get adversarial with the person who's actually I'm up against. So the only thing I've seen people drive in Porsches, park out the front. I've seen everything. But at the end of the day, confident, strong bidding from about the point where it goes on the market, where you have no hesitation. Every time someone else bids, if anyone's watched the show, they've seen a couple of opportunities where I've been at auction. I just never let the spotlight be on me. If someone's bidding, I send it straight back. So it's like the interrogation lamp is always on them, because what I'm looking for is body language. And if I'm bidding in 5,000, as soon as they drop it down to 1,000, I go, right, we're close to their pointy end. I'm starting to look for body language. I'm starting to look for conversations with their partner. I never stand next to anyone. If I'm bidding for a client, I say, I'm going to professionally ignore you at this auction until it gets to the pointy end, because I want no one to know who I'm bidding for. Because if I'm standing next to you, they're going to watch your body language. I often put my headphones on, just one out of my ear, even though I'm not talking to someone, because I need them to just be guessing. I need them to be guessing, who am I bidding? Have I got a Chinese buyer overseas on the end of this call?
I use the same technique.
It's all about confidence. It's 1-part strategy, 2 parts bluff. So you've got to bluff as much as you can. And that's not easy to do because of the public speaking environment, the clever auctioneers, all those sorts of things. So, but ultimately, if you attend as many auctions as you can start to build some skills around this.
You do, and for me, I flew up recently to Sydney. We have a client in Sydney who's trying to buy an owner-occupied home, and they said, look, can you come up and bid for us? And I said, I'd more than happy to. So I was going into a foreign market. I'd done my research on the value of the home, and we talked about setting price, and we did that. But because I'd never seen this auctioneer work before, and here in Sydney it's a little bit different. There's specialised auctioneers who the agency recruit for the day, and they come in and do that, as opposed to they're not part of the network. Whereas down here in Melbourne, usually, if it's a Jallis Craig auction, you've got a regular auctioneer that's, comes around and does the auction. So I didn't know this guy at all. Now, I'm a buyer's agent, right? So I actually front-footed it, and I went up and introduced myself, and I said, look, I'm here to bid. And in Sydney, you have to register to bid. In Melbourne, you don't have to. So I said I didn't want to disclose to the listing agent who I was bidding for, and he just needed to see evidence of that. He got that, and I just said, so what's your process? I said, are you going to be straight through, or are you going to go and seek further information? And because he knew me as a real estate agent, he actually, and saw me as a professional, he just opened up, said, look, my process and my strategy is this. I will, try and create it, and I will go in and seek further guidance. But when we hit the reserve, I'll let you know. And that's all I needed. Because I'm going to keep my powder dry in my hands, because I don't need to be in the game, the gamesmanship, the street theatre that we're talking about earlier. I need to come in when the property's on the market.
I bid at an auction on Saturday. The lady, it was a 360 to 390 price guide, sold for 621.
Oh my God!
And there was a lady crying at the end. And she was out at 440. So that's the challenge with the auction process. It kind of keeps a buyer's agent in place, but it doesn't make it right.
No.
I guess the other thing is 600 in Melbourne is a very interesting price point, because at that point, first home owners, if they pay a cent over, lose about $10,000 worth of stamp duty concessions. So that leads on to another good point: is you never set your limit at a round number. So if you've got a budget of 600. You really need 603 or 607, in my view, because you could end up picking up a property for a few $1,000, stop you looking next week. And if someone gets to 600 before you, and you've both got 600 as a limit, you might miss out for $1,000. So that's really, really important that you do set your limit before you turn up. Be pre-approved before you turn up, set your limit, but never finish on a 0 or a 5. If your budget's 615, make it 617. Just because other people do zeros and fives.
Some of the other things that I also worry about when I go to auction is the dad with the daughter. If I'm buying an investment unit or something like that and I see dad with his daughter, he's my biggest worry, because they've probably done the due diligence and they've set their price point, but daddy's going to come home and bring home the property if he gets emotionally attached to it. So my strategy there is I'm trying to lock him out. So I'm trying to get big numbers moving quickly, early, to get the property on the market if I've done my due diligence and I know it's going to come on the market at the right price point and it's still within that price back. Because if he gets into the conversation, and he will get emotional about it, and so he would usually spend $20,000-$30,000 more, sub 500, than they'd agreed to. And she'd be standing there and I'll see it happen because she's looking in and going, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he's just like, that's it. It's all about pride for daddy to deliver the result. I hate it.
Well, that's a good point, because it's a public display of competition and how much I'm worth.
Yep.
And I have to agree with you, that's the most critical concern when you do see that. Because on Saturday, the bidder that I was up against was two young first-time owners. I saw them at 600. Yeah. Every bid after 600, they looked at mum and dad.
Yeah, it's great.
They looked at mum and dad.
There's that body language.
Because it was mum and dad who were making the decisions over 600. I remember when I bought for a couple on the show I think it was last season, we're buying a 2-bedroom Art Deco apartment in Bondi. And it was in Sydney, they often do a lot of in-room auctions versus in Melbourne, they do it on the on site. And so there was about 7 in the lineup. We were about number 4. And I waited my whole career for this point, but I've got to say the story. I walked in and everyone, not everyone, there was a few people who went, oh no, he's here. and I've been doing this for 16 years and I've been waiting my whole career for someone to say that. So we'd intimidated them before they walked in.
Yeah, not that you want to be known for someone who pays more than the value of the
property. No, but they just know that they're up against someone who knows what they're talking about. But I remember the pre-auction drinks I was having with the couple. Mum was there. She was having a couple of glasses of wine and she got competitive. And she goes, all right, I'll just throw another 20,000 in the mix. So the budget moved about 70,000 from the pre-wine to post-second glass of wine on behalf of
the cameras and wanting the result. And Yep.
So in this case, the cameras weren't there. We weren't allowed in with the cameras into the auction room. Yep. So they were outside. But that's a very, very good point you make, that the firstie or the young couple with a parent on the wing is definitely one of your big competitions.
And in terms of the auction process, we're obviously going to tell you to not be afraid, but the reality is you are going to be afraid. It's not something you're comfortable with or familiar with, but if you can try and, because you only build knowledge from experience. These are one of the things that is important. So, for us being involved in thousands and thousands of these things, that's why we don't get the sweaty palms. The heart rate definitely moves because we're still playing with other people's lives. Yeah. And if it didn't, as you say, if I didn't get excited by it, then you're not
alive.
Well, it's not a good thing because again you don't want to do the wrong tactic by not being pumped at the time you need to be fully alert and aware, and you're reading those signs. You're reading the Chinese buyer. When you get to the auction, we're analysing the crowd. We're working out who the neighbours are. If we've got enough time, we may have got there 30 minutes before and we're just watching people go through the house, and we're listening for signs, looking for indicators in terms of who our competition's going to be. And in some cases, because we've got long relationships with these agents, some of them will be silly enough to tell us.
Well, that's my next point. If we've got these long relationships, so the tip to any listener who's going to auction this weekend, go and find out the name of the auctioneer. And if it's John, every time you make a bid, I'll give you another $1,000. Thanks, John. Because again, if you remember, I used to think it was 2-part strategy, 1-part bluff. It's now, I think it's 2-part bluff, 1-part strategy. Yeah. If I'm calling the auctioneer by name, the people who I'm up against are going, hang on a second, what's going on here? This bloke knows him. And they start to get suspicious and they leave their hands in the pocket. Not all the time.
Yep.
But you want to create doubt.
Correct. And again, the person who's got the deepest pockets will usually get the property, but there has been occasions where we know through professional skill in negotiating and those auction tactics, that we've won properties that we shouldn't have won. And people have gone up to the selling agent or the auctioneer later and saying, what just happened? Oh, is it definitely sold? Is that, just again, inexperience sometimes gets us the property at the price, and we steal some, don't we?
I always think you're trying to stop the person throwing away their last 10, 15 grand. You want them to go, he knows the auctioneer, stuff it, he's got it anyway.
Correct.
Keep the 10, 15 in the pocket, and that's where you're adding the value. At 1.876 for my cousin, we spent 1.816, so we kept 60 grand in our pocket. And I remember one of the neighbours coming up to me afterwards and just going, gee whiz, you bought that really well. I would have actually sold my house to be able to buy that house for that price. And I actually think that we, through not being afraid of the process, we actually didn't have to spend that last 60 grand, which is really, really good. I want to talk about pre-auction offers. Lots of clients get excited at the thought, well, I like this property, I'm going to put a pre-auction offer in. I would caution people from putting in pre-auction offers. You should put it in at certain times, but quite often, if the agent is doing the right thing by their vendor, the competition is what they want. They want to cast the net as wide as they can so that they can get as many fish into the net so they can catch the biggest fish ultimately at the end of the day. So it's kind of like the domino effect. They really want to put as many black dominoes underneath the red one, so the red one goes higher and pays more. Now, pre-auction offers, in my view, should only really be done. There's no rule of thumb with real estate, that's the challenge, but generally speaking, in the third week of the campaign. Because if you make an offer in the first week, they go back to the vendor and the vendor says, we haven't tested the market long enough.
That's good. Yeah. We've got some interest. Yeah. Let's bank that interest.
And what does a real estate agent say? Buyers are liars.
Yep.
So we never tell them how much we've got.
Yep.
So it's just a way for them to find out where the level is, where water finds its own level. So I would say be very cautious of making offers in the first and second week. Now, there are times when you will, and that's where you've got to know the vendor's circumstances, because there are times when you can.
Yep.
But generally speaking, week 3 is your strike point, because they've had the property on the market long enough to test the market, so the vendor feels comfortable that they've thrown it out far enough.
Or the agent's now starting to doubt whether he's got interest or not interest. So the agent's reaching out and they won't normally reach out to a general buyer, but they'll reach out to a BA, a buyer's agent, won't they? And we then know that's the time for us to strike, whereas maybe the average buyer wouldn't have that opportunity sometimes.
Well, there's agents here in Melbourne who ring us up and they say, hey, look, this property would be great for you. We're happy to sell it prior to auction. We're happy to do a dance with you in week 3 because we want week 1 and week 2 to meet as many buyers as we can so that we can get our next listing. And then we're happy to let the property go because the owner doesn't really want an auction campaign anyway. So that stuff only comes through experience, through relationships, through having the network. But in my view, if you try and make an offer in the last week of a campaign, it's very difficult because the agent gets nervous because if you buy it, say, on the Monday or the Tuesday, it's not subject to the same conditions as an auction campaign. So you got a cooling off period. So you could actually stuff up their campaign, cool off, and then it's game over. So to give yourself the best chance of a pre-auction offer, week 3, no rules at all. Veronica is always saying to me, Bryce, there's never any rules with real estate, and I tend to agree with her. But as a general rule, week 3 is your best chance to get a pre-auction offer done.
And if you're on 2 properties and you're legitimately on 2 properties for the one client, then you will, and you will always have a preferred. Like once you actually work through your checklist of the reasons why you're buying it or why it's a good investment, there'll always be one that stacks up better, whether it's an 8.5, 9 and an 8.5 that you're competing. You'll make that call. So you can be aggressive pretty much the night before or the day before to try and get it off the market with a fallback. And so for me, again, that's the exception to the rule, whereas I do like the 3rd week rule as well.
Agreed. A couple of quick ones as we close off. You've got to get your ducks lined up in a row. So you must be finance approved before you go to auction. I see people do it all the time and it just surprises me how many people don't get that short up before they go. You've got to get a building and pest inspection done. I was at an auction, I think I talked on the podcast a few weeks ago, where a lady bought it. She was one of 9, football crowd. She turned up on the day. She didn't even get a building and pest inspection done prior, which is crazy. And then getting the contract reviewed. Send it off to your solicitor. Are there any red flags that I should be aware of before I'm prepared to part with my hard-earned cash?
Because with a contract, guys, it's negotiable. You can actually negotiate terms prior to the auction. You can't negotiate them after. So it's really important that you actually get those conditions in your favour, or as the best you can, to be a willing bidder at the auction. So that's important.
We included an extra A that allows us to use the campaign photos.
Correct.
Advertise prior to settlement and have it open for inspection in the week leading up to settlement, because we're buying for investors.
Correct. That's right. And then finally, guys, if this all sounds too intimidating for you, seek out a professional buyer's agent. So they're a licensed real estate agent. They work on behalf of the buyer and they are skilled in this area. So ask them how many auctions that they're bid for, for clients. Those types of things are really important. So if you're not sure, do some further research and maybe engage a professional to work on your behalf.
Very, very good point. All right, there you go, folks. There's some tips for you if you're going to auction this weekend that you can employ to help you get, A, the best outcome in terms of price, and B, give you the best opportunity to prepare for the tactics that the agent's likely to throw at you. So there we go, Ben. Also, we'd love you to go to thepropertycouch.com.au. We've got plenty of free resources there now. After half a year of doing this with Ivis's help, we've got plenty of videos up there that you can check out. I did an auction video series that we're going to put up onto thepropertycouch.com.au. It was actually a 3 or 4 part series. So we put the first part up, and then over the coming weeks, we'll put the other parts up there for you to check out as well. And as per usual, if you can go to our social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, that's where you find out first when the episodes are out. And of course, we've been getting some great questions, but we'd certainly love to spread the message on what we're doing. So if you get a chance to go to the Property Couch to get some of those free resources, if you wouldn't mind just giving us some feedback, leave a review on what you think, good or bad, and how we can actually address any of the questions or queries that you might have, please feel free to do that. Now, Ben, we've got to this point now where after a year or half a year, we for about the first 95% of the podcast, we give the illusion that we got some credibility, maybe some intelligence, and then we get to this last bit here,
and this is where
it all goes downhill. And I think maybe some of the listeners pause at this point, and other listeners
finish up now. There's nothing to see.
So for those listeners who don't like our tour around the world for Arrivedercis, we'll see you next week. And for those who do, Ben, where are we going?
We're going in Danish.
Oh, this is interesting.
This is Danish, and so forgive me if I pronounce this incorrectly. But this is
here we go, folks.
Favel.
Sounds good. Right.
I don't know.
I think that'll pass.
If you go any Danish listeners out there,
border security. Favel. There we go. All right, folks. There you have it. Favel. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.